We are honored to have our speakers here today, sharing their diverse knowledge and insights into this pandemic. So, this particular format was carefully discussed and finely tuned. Considering some of the emails, texts, eye rolls, snarks noted, a number of people appear to have been expecting very different things from this webinar, probably about 82 different things. Following these simple directions carefully is not always easy with a topic as complicated as astrology. Each speaker has 10 minutes and only 10 minutes. There will be options for longer sharings at another time. The speakers were instructed to cut their content if too long, or speak faster and stay grounded, which will help the audience to understand them. A necessary strategy for the speakers is to state their premise at the beginning of their presentation. Audience will have a kind of hook in their brains to hang information on, and will have a reference point to return to if needed. In our format today, it really is paramount that the speakers stay firmly on topic and speak on one facet of that topic. In general, listeners will find this more satisfying, time being short. There will be a bell at the 9-minute mark. At 10 minutes, the speaker will be muted. We suggest you not take it personally. Every week, I listen to a 30-minute astrology webcast. When time is up, the host just stops the talking, pulls the plug, because that is the time frame set in place. This is normal practice in media. We will then go on to the next speaker. Bear in mind, though, that anything can happen on a live webinar.
Welcome everyone to our panel discussion number 3, COVID-19 update. Today you will hear talks by Erin Sullivan, Kim-Marie Weimer, Kristin Fontana, Bradley Naragon, Rose Marcus, Sol Jonassen, Daniel Fiverson, Cyndy Clemens, Leah Breznay, Stacie Pazura, and Cameron Allen. We will now begin with our friend and colleague, world-famous astrologer, Erin Sullivan. Please go ahead, Erin.
Well, hi everyone. I hope you're all feeling well and not too exhausted. This has been quite a draining time, and it will continue to be so for some time. But I was looking at the ephemeris today, and I noticed, I just want to start off with a bit of astrology, and then I'm going to talk about Venus for a few minutes, because she plays a huge role in transmission of viruses and that are not airborne, but are really borne by air through spittle and drops and so on. But the have an exact conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, just to make the whole scene really big, and also Mars with Saturn at 0 Aquarius. Jupiter and Pluto are at 24 Capricorn, and Mars and Saturn are at 0 Aquarius today. And the moon is in exact opposition to Mars and Saturn as we speak. And so I have to assume that our checks are in the mail, and that I'm looking forward to getting my $1,200 that the US government has apparently promised us, but I'm not too sure if that's going to be real or not. But the thing about having some focus on Venus today, to start off the talk, is that Venus is really a dual goddess, both of the Taurus and also of the social interaction and also the hierarchy that takes place in any educational or governmental placement. And Venus this year is going to be very unusual because it stations retrograde on the 4th of May, and it doesn't go direct until the 26th of June. So it is its typical 40 days and 40 nights, which is a very biblical term, but it's a 40-day, 40-night transit always. But it will be in Gemini for 5 months this year. And Gemini is an air sign. So it has to do with airborne and any kind of intercommunications with other people, and how cautious we've had to become, and how organized people have been about it, and absolutely wonderful, really, on the whole. Aside from an interview or a discussion I saw with Donald Trump, with all of his compadres standing within 1 foot of each other. And it was unbelievable to watch the response online as people were commenting on, why are they standing so close together? I thought it was supposed to be 6 feet apart. So, I mean, we can't rely on the leaders. We have to rely on ourselves. And the planet Venus is important in that she has many cognates. And I'm going to list them: venal, venereal, viral, vent, invent, advent, prevent, just to name a few. And all of these words actually rule virus. And she doesn't leave the sign of Gemini until August the 8th. So, and it'll be in Gemini when she goes retrograde on May the 4th. So it's actually going to be months, 5 months in Gemini. And so I thought that was fascinating. And right now, she's stunning in the sunset sky. If anyone has access to the sunset, go on out and take a look at how incredibly bright she is. And in that phase, Venus is known as Venus Hesperus, which means the the sun-setting sky is holding her in its arms as she goes through her phase, as she approaches the retrogression on May the 4th. And the infection of air signs is, I think, probably part of what's going on when I consider that we've got Mars conjunct Saturn today at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is the collective unconscious in the psychological sense, but it's also the collective as we touch and reach out and communicate with each other. And so this panel is, to me, just one of the most exciting things that's taken place. Not that I'm pleased that it's happening because of what's happening, but I just think that the fact that there's so many of us that are getting together and talking astrology and being sensible and very, very smart about it, I'm so impressed. I will stick through the whole thing. I mean, I was said that I don't have to, but I'm definitely wanting to, especially hearing all the different speakers. I'm sorry Dave is not here. I would have liked to have seen her. So this infectious disease that's going through the world is an air sign. And as such, it has to do with the capacity for communication. And so we have to learn new ways of communicating with each other, which is what we're doing here with this, with being online, in the air. And it's very important for us to recognize that in this 40 days and 40 nights when she's in Gemini, and then really in Gemini for, as I said, for 5 months, that it's going to be not any too soon that this virus stops. And a virus is different than an infection because it actually is only really brought into the body through some form of liquid from the other person. So coughing and is not allowed. No coughing is allowed unless you completely mask yourself. And therefore, being very, very cautious and very, very isolated. That's the other problem with what's going on, is that with Venus in its position and being retrograde during so much time, that we are really feeling isolated. I personally am pretty much okay because I live in Santa Fe because of my kids, and they look after their mom. I just got my fridge is too full of food. This is the thing that we have to do, is we need to stock up, make sure that we're safe, make sure that we have enough food, and that we are in a position where we can actually get about without having to make, really personal contact in a very intimate way. I think and also with the moon today, exactly as we begin our talk, being at the opposition to the collection of planets that are in a trine right now, she's in exact opposition to the Mars-Saturn conjunction. So what we're talking about today, which this implies, is we're talking about emotional responses to a collective virus that has going to basically shrug. It's like Earth is about to shrug off billions of people. It's almost as if we really are too many. And people have talked about it before, for years we've been talking about something happening where it would shrug off loads of people. And that's exactly what's taking place. I'm not particularly, I have no feelings about this, aside from the fact that I think it's probably rational, and that that's part of what the disease is about, is that the Earth has finally rebelled. A friend of mine who is one of my old hog farm friends, he's a very good writer and best superior photographer, did a photo essay on the skies of LA where he lives. Now, when I lived in LA with my father when I was my 6 or 7 in the early 50s, the skies in LA were fantastic. The clouds were beautiful. And then, of course, slowly we started watching, because we lived in the hills of Burbank, watching something rising, sort of scrim of smoke. And finally it became absolutely, utterly, especially when they had signs saying up, another freeway for your safety. And, everybody thought that was really wonderful. But of course, now we know what freeways do is they cause pollution. And the pollution rate has dropped tremendously. The skies in LA are even clear. I mean, this is where Andy Romanoff in his photo article, wrote about how clear the skies were in Los Angeles, which is a kind of a template for health and well-being and clearing up what's going on. So I think I'm going to leave it there for now, because we've got nice speakers coming up, lots of them, and I want to give the time for them. But I wanted to bring in the daily, sort of the journal of the day. And so let's make this moon opposite Mars-Saturn, it's exact right now, in fact. Make it opposite, make it, bring us to some understanding and some emotional. I think this panel has done a lot for people's feelings. And the feeling function is so important when the moon is involved. And involved in opposite to Mars and Saturn is saying, look, we're going to have more emotional contact, more human contact. And this is a very good way of doing it. And thank you, Linda Johnson, for arranging such a thing. It's just phenomenal. Thank you. And I'm just looking forward to what everybody else has to say.
Thank you so much, Erin. Great to hear from you. Let's now go to our next speaker, Kim Marie Weimer. Please go ahead, Kim.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you, as Erin said, to Linda and everybody at EA Zoom for allowing us to all get together and speak like this. I'm going to carry on from where I left off a week ago. I'm going to speak mainly about what's ahead for the United States in the few minutes that we have. First of all, though, I'm going to Capricorn rising, be very practical. As each day goes by, it's easy to get caught up in the collective fears, the psychological contagions. And so I just want you to know that there are those practical things that they tell us to do all the time. Wash your hands, wash your hands. There's a scientific reason for it, specifically with coronaviruses. They are single-strand RNA that's encapsulated in a fatty tissue molecule. So you know how you're doing to do dishes and you have the greasy pan and you put lots of soap in the water to break up all the grease? It's exactly what you're doing with the coronavirus when you wash your hands with regular soap and water. Doesn't need to be anything special. And after that, if you're looking at the various surfaces that you want to clean, you know, regardless of what they are, the best thing to use is hydrogen peroxide. And you can use a 3% solution, or you can use what they call accelerated hydrogen peroxide, which is just a little more concentrated. And one of the most popular brands is called Rescue. This works better than alcohol, bleach, or vinegar. Alcohol has to be at least a 60% alcohol solution to work. Bleach is so caustic. And vinegar is really not quite strong enough. It works, but you got to leave it on a surface, say, for a long period of time. So you can see on your screen there how you can just use that for practical reasons. I've also included the source of this if you want to look it up. And I said last time that 2 of the supplements that are most protective for us in fighting off the exposure to the virus are vitamin D and the flavonoid quercetin, which is part of the C complex. And so you can research more of those on the same source that I give you on down below at the bottom of your screen. I just want to briefly talk to you about 2 different countries. And coronavirus was discovered on January 20th in both the United States and South Korea on the same day. In South Korea, in the first week, the government tasked 20 private companies to develop a coronavirus test. They did it within the 1 week. South Korea to date has done 5 times as much testing per capita as we have done here in the United States. They have been able to limit new cases to being less than 100 cases daily. In addition to the testing, they did what we call the shelter in place, really trying to shut down that social proximity of closeness and isolate the virus. We compare this to the United States, where it was not until 6 weeks later before our government in the United States said, okay, private entities, we want you to help us. Basically, our CDC, the first test they started to roll out didn't work very well. False positives, false negatives. We were behind the curve, 4 to 6 weeks, just compared to South Korea, for example, in being able to get accurate testing, and we're still trying to get the testing on demand, which we do not have yet in the United States. What it has resulted in for our country, thank you international listeners, I'm from the United States. What's happened for those of us who live here in the United States is we are very much behind the 8 ball, and we have not seen the peak of our curving yet. I suspect that the month of April and even into the month of May will blow our minds if we are not good at grounding ourselves here in the United States and taking all of these practical precautions seriously in being able to flatten the curve of how this virus is going to be expanding. So here is the chart that I left off with last week. I used the Gemini rising chart for July 4th, 1776. Most of what I say is going to be accurate, whether or not you use this one or you use the Sag rising Sibley chart. I'll work more with signs so that what I say is accurate for both of the charts. If you look to your left of the screen, many of us are becoming aware that the United States has transiting Pluto, balsamic to its natal Pluto at 27.5 cap. Before that, though, we have Pluto making 5 oppositions to Mercury in Cancer. And that natal Mercury opposition to natal Pluto, those are the only 2 retrograde planets in the chart. They are emphasized for the soul of this country in how are we going to basically communicate information out there. We won't go into all the fake news and conservative liberal stuff. Let's just say it boils down to whether we're going to be inclusively based or exclusively based. So in addition to that, we have Jupiter opposing Mercury 3 times in the US chart. We have Saturn, transiting Saturn, going over the natal US, Pluto 3 times in 2020. This is a highly intensive year for this country. If you're waiting for 2022 to have that death and rebirth in the soul of our country, it's come early. We are in it right now. What I want to add on to that picture, though, is what transiting Neptune is doing to the United States chart over that same time period, these next 2 to 3 years. Neptune in general rules the immune system. It's been moving through its own sign, Pisces, since 2011 to 2025-26. And what Neptune is doing, it is exposing all of the ways we have compromised our immune system in this country. We are the richest country in the world. We have 4% of the world's population. We have 20% of the world's COVID-19 cases. In this luxurious lifestyle that many of us have compared to the rest of the world, we don't eat healthy. We are obese and we are undernourished. We are malnutrition. And that is causing a compromised immune system. And as we look at transiting Neptune in Pisces here, it's going to make 5 last quarter squares to Mars in Gemini. And then it is going to make 3 oppositions to its natal position, Neptune in Virgo. Virgo being one of those signs that rule diet, exercise, and rest. Generally in EA, Pisces 12th house Neptune archetype will be the energy behind the manifestation of a disease, the origins of it. Go to my last week's slide if you want to see me talk briefly about that in some other ways. And then the Virgo 6th house and ruler Mercury deal with the manifestations of that. So this polarity in the zodiac has a lot to do with health and wellness. And what we're going to be seeing with Neptune making these last quarter squares to Mars is that dichotomy, Gemini, the 2 sides between the haves and the have-nots. We're already seeing it exposed to this in this country where Hollywood can get the test on demand. Hollywood has the resources to isolate themselves and be okay. But then we have a hot spot like New Orleans where so many people in the city center are obese and do not have the resources. They have the poverty. We're going to see this Mars in Gemini expose this difference between haves and have-nots. We're going to see the Neptune opposition to itself continue to expose that we do not have healthy healthcare in this country for all the resources, spending 2 times as much as the average as other industrialized countries. What we are looking at over these next few years is a total upheaval and rebirth of the US healthcare system. Anybody who says we will not move to universal healthcare in the United States has their head in the sand. We will do it because we have no choice, which is what we tend to do sometimes here. Try everything else and then finally go with something that maybe will work. It will not only be healthcare that we overhaul in this country, because there will be another coronavirus after this one. They have existed forever. SARS, coronavirus, Spanish flu, coronavirus. We'll have the next one come along. So what will we learn from this one to prepare ourselves for the next one that comes? And here in the United States, with this Neptune opposition that's going to be in orb over the next 5 years or so, we may find that the next worldwide crisis with health starts with us. Who knows? So the coronavirus is really acting as the catalyst for so many things. Many of the following speakers will bring up different subjects that will show us how it's a catalyst, not only here in the United States, but also worldwide. Because the United States has so much to do with how the financial and monetary markets work, as we go through this crisis, we're going to have to overhaul all of our fiscal and monetary policies as well. We claim to be so anti-socialist, but who is really looking at socialistic actions in our federal government, which we just saw, taking half of our annual budget and turning it into a surplus to help the people, to help our economy. We will see so many social issues change in the United States over the next few years. As this crisis wanes, for those of you who want to do something with what comes next, you can be active on social levels in whatever way it perceives you to move and motivate. Jupiter in Aquarius through 21, Saturn in Aquarius 21, 22. Those are going to be the years where we can really step up to the plate here and make a lot of the changes that so many of us in the astrological world have wanted to see. One of my passions is the public banking movement. I did not put a slide in here for this this week. You can I think I did it last week, but I'll say it right here for you now. Publicbankinginstitute.org. Publicbankinginstitute.org. No matter where on planet Earth you live, you can get involved with returning the interest back to the masses and take it away from Wall Street and give it back to all of us. Just a couple issues there. Finally, this is a slide I did use last time. Highlighted in red, especially for those of us in the United States, is going to be the timing for the worst outbreak. We are looking at April, May, June, everybody. It's not going to be over fast, and I think there's going to be a second wave of it come back this fall in this country. What you see highlighted in blue is the time period it's going to take us for vaccines and drugs to actually have something for the masses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim Marie. If you could please stop your share. And our next speaker now is Kristin Fontana.
Hello, everyone. Well, I'm going to take a different kind of turn. I loved all that information, though. I was lapping it up. Thank you, Kim Marie and Erin Sullivan before her. I wanted to call this talk Mother Earth Speaks, or She Speaks, and Venus definitely is speaking, and Mother Earth is speaking. So really the title is Why This, Why Now? And what I love so much about evolutionary astrology is the fact that this paradigm, this deep body of work, can answer the question why. We already know what. We know what's happening. We just have to look around us. But then it becomes even vitally more important to answer the question why, which both of you, Kim Marie and Erin, have been doing a wonderful job sharing. And I also was looking back at when the last time Pluto had conjunct its own south node in the 1770s, right before the USA became a country. And while there were some pretty big transits going on collectively, they weren't half as big as what we're experiencing now. So the way I understood this, the past giant period of time that as souls we've been moving through, many of us have been here many times since then, you think about reincarnation, is that everything is coming to a full stop. We've reached a limit. That's Capricorn. It's a karmically collective karmic closure, and it's, you know, everything is reaching critical mass as we're all experiencing. And unfortunately, all of the separation, the exclusion, the self-interest, all of that has created its own kind of karma. So for all the souls who are living more naturally, sharing, giving, and including, are they going to suffer the consequences as well? And yet we all need to be here on this planet. Those that are giving, those who are sharing, have to remind the people that are not doing that, that it will never lead anywhere good. The law of cause and effect is karma, is Pluto. So in looking at this particular chart, I'm showing here March 24th because that day was a new moon in Aries. And it was a powerful week. And every day is powerful at this point. Everything's doubling and tripling. But I really found this particular chart compelling on this day, because when we think about Aries, we think about something new beginning. We think about spring, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. We think about fresh starts and are these new desires that are being birthed within us. And you see in this chart, it's sitting here in the house of communication and how we communicate, how we connect, everything changing. And on this day, we had the south node of Mars. Mars does rule the sign of Aries. The south node of Mars connects to our past. South node, past. At 29 degrees of Sagittarius, conjunct the south node in Capricorn, right here with the 29-degree Sagittarius rising. When we think of Sagittarius, we think of natural laws, natural ways of being in the world, and being honest, being truthful, being open. And with the south node of Mars triggering this south node in Capricorn, it's forcing us all to get back to what is natural, get back to what we must do to survive. I find it fascinating that the south node of Mars was also conjunct the galactic center, which is 28 Sag. It's literally igniting all that energy again. It's igniting all the souls that remember what it was like to live more naturally, and to look out for your neighbor, to look out for your loved ones. I love that Erin's kids are stocking her fridge, and whatever else people need to do to really love the ones they're with, to look out for the people that they can reach in whatever ways that they can, to think first of others instead of ourselves. It forces that kind of mentality, and it forces that way of being in the world, or else everything will for sure collapse. And we can witness that when we witness all those people on the front lines, the medical profession, who are risking their life to take care of others. That is a Venus component. To give is Venus naturally, and they're risking everything for us. Risking it, front lines, that's that Aries component again. South node of Mars in Sagittarius, on that south node, there's a lot of people that are risking their lives for us. In addition, we see Lilith here, who is the original wild woman. Lilith is she, not he. Her original roots, not to be confused with the black moon Lilith, which is the crescent moon with the cross below her, but the original Lilith is a natural wild woman, the feminine within us all, within a man, within a woman, who is working now so hard with Mars to spearhead a new pursuit to get everything back into better balance. We are at war with this virus, all of us. There's not a single soul on this planet who has not been affected, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. Everyone is going to be affected in one way or another, some of us more than others. Everything or everybody will be stripped of something. And so what happens is that it does take an extreme to counteract an extreme. It's an evolutionary teaching. The extreme connected to Venus, what has become so out of balance, so terribly out of balance. And so it will take this dramatic swing in another direction for the world to wake up. In some countries, it's worse than others. For sure in the United States, we are way behind. And I was just aghast, really. I think it was yesterday or the day before, when I read this article about all these churches that are still in session. Louisiana, one of them, where they have one of the biggest problems. There's like several hundred people sitting in a congregation, no masks. I realize this isn't airborne yet, but there's so much going around within us, and that they feel that maybe they will be protected by God. I mean, this is the lack of awareness, a lack of conscious awareness that is going to be lead to our demise in this country if people don't change the ways that they are living their lives on a moment-to-moment basis. And this brings me back to another Sagittarian topic. Sagittarian is ruled by Jupiter, which is connected to our beliefs. All those people sitting in the pews think either it won't happen to them or that God will protect them. And unfortunately, they're going to become very disillusioned by the fact that this won't be true for them and for many people that they love, especially in Louisiana. And I read an article too, in Florida, this was also the case. They're one of the top 2 states in the country that are escalating in these cases. And so that has got to stop. But, you know, sometimes it takes people dying, people that you know, before others will wake up and say, oh my gosh, you know, what am I doing? So the beliefs piece of this is another major part of it. So we look here further, and we've got Jupiter, Pluto and Mars all conjunct in Capricorn on this day. Mars and Pluto are in a new phase conjunction on the day of a new moon. Pluto and Jupiter are in a balsamic conjunction. So again, this topic of belief coming full circle, balsamic, and a new start that must be implemented, new structures, new realities, how we spend our time. They're all conjunct here in this current transiting chart. Now see how they are conjunct the south node of Jupiter, the south node of Pluto, the south node of Saturn. These transiting planets that are currently happening are conjunct their own south nodes. Saturn just came across its own south node. So the question becomes, you know, what does this mean for me or for you, you might be asking. Of course, we are all experiencing this collectively. We all have different charts that reflect our soul's journey. And so every single person's natal chart is going to be different. Where do we see that we're all experiencing that? And here's the chart that shows it. Overlapping the current transits to the south nodes of all of these planets reflects the fact that we as a collective are in this together. We as a collective are experiencing the karmic hit of hundreds of years of abuse to this planet, to the mother, essentially. Capricorn is all about the heavy hitters, those in power, the nationalistic politics that ensue, the us versus them mentality. It's the take, not the give. The North Node in Cancer, look at her, all the way over there by herself in the 7th house. Look at her. And the North Node in Cancer represents the matriarchy, more natural times, our mother roots, the way things used to be, organically, naturally, thousands and thousands of years ago, 8,000 years ago at this point, it must be. And so when you look at her over there by herself, you think about what is it going to take for us to restore a state of balance again. Balance is 7th house, Libra, ruled by that Venus. Venus is, the 7th house is naturally ruled by Venus. And Venus in this chart is trining Jupiter, Pluto, Mars. You know, showing the way forward. The only way forward is for us to know what we need to survive and to know how to protect the ones that we love in order to survive. And I was talking to a friend who's been following some of the EA teachings, and she shared something that was really powerful to me. When I think about Libra and I think about the 7th house, I think about the country Italy. And I have roots in Italy. And how much grief is taking place there, how many people are dying. It is an epicenter. The US will far surpass this, but Italy is a much smaller country. And they treasure the mother. They treasure the grandmother. They treasure the meal that the grandmother made and spent all day. You know, preparing for her family. And I think about all of the industries up in northern Italy in particular, which is where this really went wild initially. I think about the waters in Venice that were just murky and horrible, and the pollution, like Erin was talking about, the clear skies in LA. I don't live there anymore. I would love to see those. But anyway, yeah, and she was saying, it's incredible what has happened in northern Italy. It is incredible how the waters in Venice are becoming clear again, and the skies as well. There is an upside to this downside. There is a silver lining to this really horrific reality that we're all witnessing, we're observing. And yet there's also a healing that's taking place because we are forced into the home. North Node in Cancer. It is forcing us to be closer to the ones that we love. And so not only is Italy so about the mother, they are about Mother Mary as well, right? So predominantly Catholic and praying to the mother. And so unfortunately, so many lives, so many people, so many souls must perish in order to wake up to a brighter, cleaner, clearer reality. So we all take care of this planet, the Mother Earth that we call her, so we all can survive and prosper. Involution must happen in order for evolution to take place. Something must die away. Pluto, Saturn, Capricorn, Pluto, Mars, Saturn, and Capricorn. Capricorn being the archetype of time, and the archetype of controlling and really taking away all that's been natural for us. So now all can return if we just return not only to our home, the physical home, but to our inner home, the home within us, through extension, the creator that gave us this planet that we all share. And so it's all necessary. But I just wanted to share with everybody that it's not just what's happening in your natal chart. There is a collective chart that we can all turn to see the writing on the wall, and we can all play a part in the healing. It does start with the inner relationship you have to yourself and clearing and cleaning those spaces, and it all really goes from there. The health travels from there. So I just wanted to thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this, and for those of you that have already spoken and those that are yet to share your wisdom with us here today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristin. Our next speaker is Bradley Naragon. Please go ahead, Bradley.
Okay. Hi, sorry about that. Oh, shoot. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not able to share right now, so I'm just gonna start this.
Okay.
We have limited time.
Are there any charts that you need? I might be able to grab them while.
I just had one slide, and it was just an introduction slide. Today, I'm having my 10 minutes. This is called Pluto and Leo's Pep Talk. As an evolutionary astrologer, I find it hard not to think of the Pluto-Leo generation during the current global crisis. Pluto was transiting in Leo from 1939 to 1957. This means that the Pluto-Leo generation is in the age range of 63 to 81 years old. Granted, I do think the Pluto Virgos and the Pluto Libras are really the culprits for filling up my inbox with a million emails regarding COVID-19 and what to do about the schools, and I'm here for you, AKA not really, and you're trying to sell me something. And I don't really have time to read all these emails because I'm actually a grocer and I'm trying to keep food on shelves. But a little confessional. I do want to admit that I found it in the past, it's been really easy for me to pick on the Pluto-Leo generation. I think they're kind of an easy generation to pick on. We know you're great and the best thing since sliced bread. And, you know, we're waiting for some of you to get over yourselves still. Stealing the limelight, and Pluto Virgos are still behind the scenes slaving away. And I can't really stand Golden Oldies radio. And yeah, perhaps maybe some of y'all have been a little self-centered and left a huge mess of everything for the millennials to deal with. Granted, there's some truth in that, but it's also unfair, and every generation has a lot of diversity in it. But now, our dear Pluto and Leos, I call on you now. Maybe you think you've already lived your glory years, fulfilled your purpose of this incarnation. No. I have a message for you. We need you now more than ever. In the face of the current crisis, I can see you're being humbled by life and perhaps having a hard time for so many reasons. I mean, we're facing questions like, will I die this year? Will my partner or spouse die? Who in my life will I lose? Will I have any investment left to cover my cost of living in my golden years? I've looked at the chart for the breakout, and you know, if you're 70 or over, there's just a way more likely suffering rate. So taking a step back into astrology a little bit, you know, not all Pluto generations get to live to see transiting Pluto in a gibbous inconjunct to their natal Pluto. And in February 1979 until February 1999, Pluto was actually closer than Neptune to the sun. So we know that Pluto takes 248 Earth years to go around the sun. But because of this extreme elliptical orbit and the perihelion being in the sign of Scorpio, the Pluto-Leo generation in particular gets to see some of the most Pluto sign transits of us all. You know, in contrast, for example, Pluto and Aries folks, they were lucky if they got to see a Pluto sextile Pluto. So I had already been thinking a lot about Pluto's transit in Capricorn relative to the Pluto-Leo generation aging, right? Pluto in Capricorn transit is symbolic for the baby boomers' aging crisis, facing limited time left in life, facing health crises that limit the ever playful spirit to be as free as earlier days. And that's hard. And I think it creates this, like, the clock is ticking sense. This gibbous inconjunct is symbolic of this evolutionary crisis. The solar strength of will and vitality in the body may be waning, but the spirit can shine and be just as strong. This gibbous inconjunct correlates to this crisis. It's humbling, and it requires a lot of adjusting these days. Adaptability becomes key now for the Pluto Leos. And are fixed signs known to being stubborn, or are they great adapters? So there's a lot of evolutionary pressure right now. So yeah, how do you deal with a gibbous inconjunct? Well, one, we analyze the current crisis. Two, we make necessary adjustments on how we're living. Easy, right? It sounds simple, but this alone can be extremely hard, especially for those of the more fixed energy Pluto Leos. Humbling oneself, asking for help, adapting to these changes of aging, also experiencing a loss of social power, and then now enter COVID-19. And the Pluto Leo generation faces a crisis even greater than they imagined. On one hand, we have to accept that someone you know may likely die in the next year, or already has. We're hoping to turn the tide on this to at least slow it down, but it raises the question for us, what is our relationship to death? In case we weren't already considering that. And to top all this off, it may look like the rug is being pulled out from under you. We all know this is possibly setting the stage for a global recession. The USA is potentially getting hit one of the hardest. Investments in stocks and bonds, what value will they have to the gears of capitalism come to a screeching halt? How does this whole economic reality founded on private ownership and capitalism start an engine after this? The machine isn't meant to stop. Goddess knows, Sallie Mae still wants those payments. Prisons still want their inmates. To add to this, the USA is of course entering its death of a nation era here. The pending Pluto return, precursor to our third Uranus return. The 2020s are going to be a real ride, and it's not going to be fun all the way, of course. And yes, the whole system needs to come crashing down and burn, and we're living unsustainable, irresponsible lifestyles due to greed, selfishness, short-sightedness leading the way. But the fallout for everyone, there's fallout for everyone, and especially the Pluto Leos facing a devastating perspective. And so I ask you, what are the glory days? What gives you the power to make this right here, right now, your greatest gesture, your time to shine? My dear Pluto Leos, it is not the time to retire and to be out for oneself. This is the trumpet call. We've had Jupiter, Saturn, Ceres, and the South Node all transiting in Capricorn, making this massive activation of this gibbous inconjunct. Now we've got, Uranus has been in Taurus, activated by Saturn entering Aquarius, even more tension and pressure for the Pluto Leos. Will you live to see your investment regain its value? Can you afford healthcare in these last days? Will you be alive in a year? The youth do have a privilege to not take this as seriously, but imagine everything you worked for the bulk of your life crumbling like a sandcastle in the waves. For the Pluto and Leos, there needs some Aquarian objectivity here to make it and weather the storm. Objectivity coupled with newfound adaptability and humility. These experiences clearly have some evolutionary necessity. What is that for you? Saturn entering Aquarius and the coming Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the first degree of Aquarius, are both activations for your calling, to be many individual leaders for humanity, to shine like the night sky full of stars. Modern Western capitalistic reality teaches us that we work, 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 and then we retire and have this privilege of enjoying a well-deserved luxury with some fruits of the labor of a lifetime of hard work that one gives us. And I'm here to say that this was a lie and that it creates inner emptiness and meaninglessness in our lives. Your soul's desire to be part of humanity. This age and time, you have a new opportunity to help revolutionize all that has gone wrong. The system is corrupt, it's unfair, it perpetuates systems of oppression. We need you to not hold on to false security of privilege, to remain separate from this and retire. We need you to fulfill now more than ever in the face of death, to heed the call, to be revolutionaries and leaders for humanity. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Bradley. Now our next speaker is Rose Marcus. Please go ahead, Rose.
Well, hello, everyone, and I'm delighted to be participating with you today. I was thinking back to so many of Jeffrey Wolf Green's lectures when he said so many times, he said, if everybody stopped and pointed the finger in and said, I take responsibility, that we could instantly change our collective consciousness and accelerate our evolution. And I was thinking that right at this point in time, with this unbelievable threat that we have of COVID-19, that is kind of what we have to do right now, is each one of us has to stop and take responsibility. there's really a necessity now to follow what the requirements are in order to combat this very big threat to our species. So the social distancing and social isolation, these things are very important. I was out yesterday at the grocery store and I didn't see any of that at the store, although those who are working there are making a good attempt at doing that. While I'm walking in the forest, all the people that I'm running into are obeying that and kind of moving over to the side. And there's some really, there's so many lovely things that are coming out of this time to pause and stop. I'm sure that that the messages have been repeated over and over. Mother Nature is giving us a time out so we can have a little think through. The time to stop and pause is so valuable, and it's so important. Time is such an important toolkit to be used, and I think that we're on the hamster wheel too much in our lives, and life drives us. And right now, we get to stop and we get to slow down. It is so amazing that this time of social isolation and social distancing can actually bring us closer together. It gives us an opportunity to actually really communicate and really share and be with one another. So it is quite an amazing experience that we're having. I wanted to read this. We were discussing the COVID-19 and discussing this on the Facebook page, and some things were coming back and forth. And someone said, well, you know, all these astrologers in the world, and nobody predicted this thing. And Imsar Adam, one of our colleagues there, wrote this, and I just wanted to read this. JWG wrote about all these things happening now over 25 years ago, more, I think. He delineated precisely the church scandals, told people to save their dollars, keep their immune system strong, find a place somewhere relatively isolated. He talked about the upcoming pandemics, the corporatist government that could form. All of this he wrote and spoke to his classes a long time ago. I always tried to communicate his insights to all my classes, for they rang true to my inner knowing. Jeffrey Green indicated to avert these things that we had to, as humanity, to make radically different choices. Obviously, we did not. He gave us the meat and bones, many tossed them aside. It's quite true in terms of the study, all of us that have come into the evolutionary astrology study, we know how this has resonated with the core of our souls. And this is exactly where we're at right now at choice point time on our planet. I wanted to put up a slide, if I may. Let me just see if I've got it here. Apologies for just a second. I hope you can see this screen. I just put up a number of the transits that I thought were relevant to the moment, and I know a lot of us have talked about the collective need, and we're at this great wake-up call now in our human collective. We are moving to the end of a world age, and our reality is on a radical shift, and will continue over the foreseeable future. Why is COVID-19 right now at its peak? The virus, I believe, began in about November of last year of 2019 by stealth. And it wasn't until about February, March that it really hit hit our consciousness. And I just wanted to kind of outline that there was a super full moon back in March. That was March 9th. And that super full moon was in direct opposition to Neptune. It was also the day that Mercury ended retrograde. Mercury took a retrograde tour in the sign of Pisces. Pisces represents the our exposure. It is exposing our immunity is vulnerable during Pisces transit. We had Mercury, ruling planet of Gemini. Gemini rules the lungs. So we had this mystery virus come in and really start to, filter its way through during that Mercury retrograde period. By the time the super full moon happened on March 9, this was really now spreading and capturing our attention in some kind of very dynamic way. Today is April 2nd, and we're right in between two super full moons. The next super full moon is on April 10. Before we get there, as you can see on the screen, April 3rd, Venus moves into Gemini and to stay until August 7. It will have a retrograde next month from May 12th to the 25th. Gemini rules the lungs. The Pisces transit that we had, the Sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. Pisces is exposure, the global exposure that we've had to this virus. This makes perfect sense, that super full moon bringing it up to the surface. Carrying on from there, we're between two super full moons. We're at high tide, March and April. In April, Venus moves into Gemini, that's tomorrow. We have on the 4th of April, Jupiter and Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. We will have 3 of these conjunctions, June 29th, both will be retrograde, and November 12th. I think that they bookend, again, a high tide. I wrote April 12th for the super full moon. That is incorrect. I apologize. It is April 7. April 12 is Easter Sunday, which is quite interesting on a really different celebration for Catholics, for sure. On the 23rd, we have Ceres moving into Pisces to stay until next year, February 20th, 2021. Again, Pisces is the collective experience. It's a global experience that we're having. Again, Pisces ruling the immune system and the fact that our immune systems are being exposed. As of May 4, we have the nodal axis switching from presently in the signs of Cancer, Capricorn, which is part of the reason that the aged and infirmed have been the first to succumb to this virus. As the nodal axis moves into Sagittarius, south node into Sagittarius, north node into Gemini, this is a mutational archetype here. Gemini is a mutational archetype. Sagittarius is kind of, nature and so forth. The virus, as I understand it, jumped from animal to human, and our immune systems are completely vulnerable. We have no natural immunity against this COVID. It's now starting to move from person to person, and that's kind of the Gemini end of things, the mutation of the virus. All the way to January of 2022, the nodal axis will be in Sagittarius and Gemini. As of May 12th, we have Mars moving into Pisces, again, the exposure piece of that. And Mars is a very big feature of the lunar eclipse on June 5th. The nodes at that time are at 29 degrees, Gemini, Sagittarius. And that eclipse is at 15 degrees Sagittarius and Gemini. That's picking up, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, the Uranus nodes. Neptune, the transit of Neptune in the sign of Pisces has been picking up on these Uranus nodes. Uranus nodes are, again, referencing our collective experience and the shock and trauma piece that we have been experiencing. The breakdown of existing reality, the acceleration of our evolution as well too. We also have the Chiron nodes that are between 26 of Aries and 2 Taurus, 23 Libra, and 6 Scorpio. Saturn transit is now in square to the north node of Chiron. All of these transits that I have on the screen, as I said, I think that we're at a peak period right now. Certainly, what we've heard from all of the medical experts out there is that we're at critical mass right now. The necessity to get it under control, like this next 2 weeks, is critical, crucial. At least I've heard that from our Canadian governments. I'm sure elsewhere as well, too. I think that as Pluto stations retrograde at the end of April, the 25th of April, coming into May, when Venus turns retrograde, we also have the retrogrades of Saturn and Jupiter just within days of Venus turning retrograde, and moving into the summer months, we have more retrogrades happening. I think that the virus is going to continue to be a significant challenge to our mortality for some time to come. The virus will continue, I think, while we have transits going through the mutable signs, through Gemini, through Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius, the nodes. I think we can expect that this is an evolving piece. We have this is a reality that's here to stay. Saturn's transit through Aquarius, it's just moved into Aquarius. Mars has just moved into Aquarius. We are on a preview test drive of the radical shift of our existing reality that we're going to be dealing with, for the foreseeable future. I think I heard the sound button here for my time is up. But suffice to say that we're at critical mass right now, and that everything that you can do to keep yourself safe, to keep yourself protected, and to keep your emotional and your emotional state in good shape. This too shall pass. But the new reality is here, and it is for each one of us to think about how we're going to proceed in that new reality, and to make the changes that we have desired for so long, but that we've been so afraid to make. There is many different ways to live your reality. And I suggest that that at this moment in time, the best that you can do is to represent for yourself. The more you do to take care of yourself, the more you will be contributing to the well-being of the collective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose. Our next speaker is Saul W. Jonassen. Please go ahead, Saul.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Rose. That was amazing and utterly inspiring and very, very interesting in terms of understanding the mutation of the virus. That was an excellent point. And I agree with you. One point that I wanted to make is that Ceres is doing a retrograde motion between July and October this year, from exactly 12 degrees Pisces to 28 degrees Aquarius. And that is exactly the degrees of the Mercury retrograde that we've had the last couple of weeks since February. We've had that happening, this whole Piscean, what the is going on, and this kind of energy. My point, though, what I wanted to focus on, because ever since this ingress of the South Node in Capricorn happened, I've been obsessed with the past. more than obsessed. I've been studying the world wars. I've been studying, the bubonic plague. I've been going into these things because it's all been happening in my soul as well. I've had extreme releases of past life memories of being in war, being stuck in tragedy. There's these, I had to deal, there's been this big, huge catharsis in relationship to my ancestral lineage. Now, through the ancestral lineage, there's also the genetic coding. Now, viruses have a big influence on our genetic codings, as they also, I think, can mutate or create changes in our inherited material. We see this in homeopathy. In homeopathy, they have a model of understanding medicine where huge viruses also created through genetics, other secondary illnesses that might occur in deeper down into the genetic lineage. Like they have these root illnesses, the root viruses that created almost like they were roots on a tree that created all the other illnesses. So this is, for me, the whole South Node transit through Capricorn has been this incredible experience of everything we've gone through collectively as a human race, our pains, our struggles, our sufferings, our losses. And there was a good point you made there, Bradley. We need to be able to accept death as part of life. We seem to struggle a little bit with that. And we've gone through mass deaths before. Now, the nodal axis was exactly reversed the time that the Spanish flu hit Europe in 1918. Then it was at 2 degrees Cancer. That was the South Node. And there was a new conjunction actually earlier on, 4 years earlier, at the beginning of the First World War, Pluto-Saturn had a new conjunction at 2 degrees Capricorn. So there's this rhythm and cycle in everything that I think is very interesting. My father said something, and he's a boomer. He said something, he's born just after the war, they were happy then. And he said something that he had picked up from his parents. My grandmother was born in 1914. She survived the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, both the world wars. And what he said that what happened during the Second World War was that people had solidarity. And that's the Cancer energy here. And that's what we've all been discussing right now. There's this, let's get together and help each other. We're in this together. We are family. And that's very, very difficult now that Chiron is in Aries and our instinctual nature is freaking out grand. It's like we are hoarding toilet paper and stuff like that. We're really feeling also the instinctual fears here, which is quite natural. It's what makes us human. Every cell has that instinctual self-protective mechanism within itself. It fights for its own survival, which is very, very important for the survival of this organism, that is me, and that organism, which is all of you. And that's how we survive. But of course, it also creates a little bit of tension in the psychology of humanity for the time being, which is also one of the big challenges for the time being, because we are called to show mastery over our emotions. We are called to let go of that particular part and actually work together, which is very against our instinctual nature, you might say, which is more wired into survival of the fittest. But I wanted to show you actually something that I think is very interesting. One of the things that I saw moving back in time was that, what if I was the only survivor in a family where all my family died in the bubonic plague? Just to examine some of my own feelings, just to have an experience of what it means to be abandoned and have that kind of experience happening. Because what I see is challenging our immune system more than anything else is the fear. Now, you spoke about being strong in your own self, Rose, and what is more important, for the immune system than the actual heart? It is the heart that this particular virus is targeting. When you feel something that has flu-like symptoms, you will feel the increased pulse. You will feel your heart is starting, blood pumping. All the little soldiers inside your blood will start fighting this virus, right? So there's this heart component in everything right now. And I think, that's why it's so important to remind yourself that a lot of what goes on now in the collective is also maybe just for a minute, let's think that's a possibility, that we're also going through like a war situation, but without a war. Yeah? This is like a war, but without a war. And I think it's kind of like it's developing us as human beings. We get to show a little bit of character. It's very like Capricorn. It's like, okay, we have to do this. You know, it's time to get to work. It's time to show up with some leadership. It's time to show people how to be the change that we want to see in the world, right? I know it's such a good point. We've been stalling this change for such a long time, and now it's forced upon us. So now we have to. So I'm quite enthusiastic, but I was born under a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, so don't mind me. I'm always positive. It's just part of my nature. Now, this is the bubonic plague as it came to be for the first time ever. It's, you know, who were there to record that one, but it was supposedly happening, the date we don't have, but we have the year. January 1331. I just put it out there for a random date. So I took off all the minor planets, no, the inner planets. But I was stunned to see that the South Node was in Capricorn. For me, that was like, okay, all right, we're here again. Here we are again, another collective potential disaster happening for us. It didn't reach our shores until 1349, but it gave me a lot of stuff to think about when it comes to being caught up in this collective energy that we are all so caught up in for the time being. Half of Norway died. Half of Norway. It's like, whoa. Very, very intense experience on the collective psyche. And there is residue of all that inside of us, especially if we want to take reincarnation seriously. This is the first case of COVID. And you can see, you know, this is the first reported case. It was in November 2019, 17th of November. This is from official records. And we can see that you know, you have that balsamic phase between Saturn and Pluto, right? And I was starting to feel the world fatigue at this point. I was starting to feel like people were tired. We had we had like a royal suicide happening this Christmas in Norway. And there was just this, like, whenever I went into the collective, it's like, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. We've been so tired as a humanity. It's been so crazy out there. We've been running like crazy to make ends meet. And when my heart goes out to everybody who's in the United States right now. I know you have to go through this, and this is going to be brutal because it's going to expose the health system and how that works for you guys. And it's been on my mind for a very long time. Thank you, Kim-Marie, for showing the chart and for shedding light on that particular aspect of it, because that's incredibly important. I'm even thinking that the United States is moving more towards socialism, which you've hated for such a long time, but it actually works when it has to taking care of their people. My heart goes really out. I've seen the stress levels. They must be so intense. I know if I get it, no problem. No problem. I'm covered. I get help, you know? I don't have to worry about that on top of everything else, you know? This is about, you know, you don't have to get that strain too. And that's so, you know, like, I think it's an important revolution for the United States, this one. You're closing up to the Pluto return. I really think this is like a choice of, a choice that will be made for the future of the United States. And we're all looking with it with great empathy, actually, from where I'm sitting at least. So what I wanted to just share the time of the full moon was the explosion. That's when it all hit, all of us. And there will be this other powerful full moon where we all have to be very mindful of our feelings. And this is the time where it's important not to I want to say, act like children. We will see very well who's got leadership potential and who doesn't. That's just part of it, you know. This is also the time for a lot of us who work with astrology or carry the power of astrology in our minds to also show up as leaders and be inspiring for other people, because people really need that kind of backup right now. But Chiron squares the nodal axis in this chart, and it's been part of the zeitgeist, if you like, for quite a while now. And we know Chiron is all about humility. It's all about knowing when to stop, knowing how to listen to yourself in your own body. Thank you, Linda. And knowing how to be humble enough to accept that being alive also includes death. It's actually accepting death as part of life, I think, is one of the things we need to really work on. And I will just finish with this, because the fear of death is the greatest fear we have. And I understand that, you know, I don't want my friends or my loved to die either. But we've gotten so far away from nature that we sort of made it into a very artificial thing. We keep people artificially alive. So yeah, that's part of being alive today. It's also being humbled by the limitations of our bodies. So take good care, people, and I am sure this will work out well. I'm definite, but I'm so optimistic. You can't listen to me. It was lovely to see you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Sol. Our next speaker is Daniel Fiverson. Please go ahead, Daniel. Daniel, can you please unmute?
Thank you, Erin and Linda, for opening this critical conversation. So what will it take to alter human behavior? You say you want an evolution. What we're experiencing right now is exactly what evolution looks like. If there's anything that I've learned observing Pluto in my own chart, in my own life, and in the life of others, it's that the species, that we as a species, human beings, seem to need to extract a maximum degree of experience from every life event that occurs. I call this the law of saturation. We don't change until we're totally saturated with each experience. It's our nature, relative to the moon, to stay in situations, relationships, jobs, even careers that we know in our hearts have stopped working. We hold on because it is safe and it's known. What's out there is unknown and scary. And when the fear becomes greater than the pain, we change. We aren't done with it until we're done with it. I'd like to move past some of the granular discussion of inceptions and mortality rates and timeframes for this pandemic and look at this event in a longer perspective. Many of us are aware of Pluto's current transit of its own south node at 22 degrees of Capricorn. Each of the outer planets has recently also transited this point. So we're being shown where our responsibility lies. Saturn rules Capricorn, generates experiences that are needed to gain skills and mastery. And it's the form and structure of time itself. And it's also reality, albeit mostly consensus reality. In order to reach maturity, we must age, and we only grow through direct emotional experience. Though we see Saturn's generative work in our outer world, Saturn's real work is done in our inner world. When it shows up as our careers and our social status and our personal authority in the world. What is really maturing is our consciousness. Evolution is the persistent process of the expansion of consciousness. And like all cycles, this process goes through cycles of waxing and waning. As astrologers, we know that we're moving through great expanses of time and space. It's a cosmic clockwork of archetypal wheels within wheels. The precession of equinoxes describes a 26,000-year cycle. And according to the spiritual teachings given by Sri Yukteswar, the teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda, we're at the end of Kali Yuga, a time frame that began 2,600 years ago, at the beginning of the Axial Age, when true saints walked the earth and major religions of the planet, major religions of the world first emerged. Right now, we're just past the quote full moon point of that cycle, which began about 14,000 years ago. And we're in the early stages of the return to Satya Yuga, which was the golden age. Native American mythology tells the story that life on Earth has been interrupted 3 times. There were 3 worlds that came before ours. According to the Hopis, we are at the end of the fourth world. The good news is that the fifth world, the return to our original state of spiritual enlightenment, will emerge even as the fourth world is dissolving. The planetary archetypes that directly correlate to evolution and enlightenment, from my perspective, are Uranus and Pluto. The first is the Promethean energy that generates disruptions and interruptions to crystallize Saturnian consensus reality, allowing new realities to be created. As the core evolutionary engine, Pluto propels us forward past our self-imposed boundaries, according to the desires and necessities that form the energetic structure of our soul-informed life path. Right now, we are currently working through the first quarter phase of this Uranus-Pluto cycle, a cycle that began with the turbulent civil rights, free love, and anti-war movements of the 1960s. A longer view of Pluto is described by his transits to the planetary nodes. In 464 of the Common Era, Pluto's nodes entered tropical Capricorn and Cancer, and this coincided with the fall of the Roman Empire, the pinnacle of patriarchy in the classical age. The ingress marks a long, slow fulcrum shift from patriarchy to matriarchy. Pluto's nodes will remain in this archetypal polarity until 2760. That's 9 Pluto cycles. We still have about 3 more cycles to go. If we look at these most recent transits to Pluto's nodes, we discover a pattern of events that speaks to the globalization of consciousness through economic crises, war, and technology. In 1929 to 1935, we had the stock market crash and the Great Depression. In 1945, we had World War II. 1960, ARPANET was put together. We had the internet emerge in 75, AOL and the World Wide Web in the 1990s. In 93, we had Google. And now in 2016, we had Donald Trump and then COVID-19 in 2020. In our most recent history, the wildfire spread of the internet relating to Uranus has added a new face to the holographic dimension of human experience and interaction. What we call cyberspace was born as ARPANET, a rudimentary digital network created by the Department of Defense in the event of national emergency that connected the federal government to major universities and hospitals. It evolved into the World Wide Web that has become the information backbone of the 21st century and beyond. Marshall McLuhan predicted this global village and the concept of spaceship Earth at the beginning of this Uranus-Pluto cycle. Also during this Uranus-Pluto cycle, we had the assassinations of the President of the United States and 2 public figures who might also have had the opportunity to occupy the White House. We had JFK in November 1961, Martin Luther King in 1968, and then also in 1968, Robert Kennedy. And this was all under the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. On September 11th of 2001, when Uranus was in conjunct Pluto's south node, the event named 9/11 as a result of the massive, overwhelming deluge of emergency phone calls that day brought the 5 boroughs of New York City, the 3 states of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and all the United States together as a single cohesive and committed community. Most recently, we've been afflicted with Donald Trump and COVID-19. The first reflects the dramatic polarization that has occurred as a result of the widening gulf created by economic disparity and human rights violations and the abundance of negative thought forms in the field. The current crisis has had the opposite effect, bringing the entire world together against the common enemy. We've had the realization of the importance of self and soul. We're reaching out to family and friends. We're connecting with neighbors. Cyberspace has become the primary connection to others and to the world in general. We're becoming proactive with our health and well-being. We are becoming heart-centered, recognizing where our true values and essential priorities lie. We're making different, more conscious choices. We're creating less CO2 emissions. We're saving money on gas, restaurants, and travel. The coronavirus is a democratizing force. We're seeing the end of hyper-individualism. Politically, there's a loss of complacency, less polarization, and greater national solidarity. We're recognizing the importance of physical exercise. We're out walking and we're biking. There's a renewed appreciation for nature, which hopefully will grow into the commitment to the earth and all of nature's beings. Demilitarization, and the word demilitarization itself is a catchword, of patriotism has occurred, where doctors and nurses and everyday people helping others have become our heroes. And expertise matters again. We're actually listening to what the experts have to say, and we're following their lead. There's a renewed appreciation, which hopefully will grow into, there are new self-organizing networks and organizations, and technology will be brought to bear on our educational systems. So there's three metaphysical truths here that we need to remember. First, we chose to be here. We signed up for this, people. Second is that the universe is reflective. What we're seeing is what we have all put out there in terms of all the thought forms and all of the intentions and priorities that we've worked on. The third one, very simply, is that it's all good. It's going to be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's because it's not the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Our next speaker is Cyndy Clemens. Just one moment, Cyndy. Okay, Cyndy, please go ahead. Cyndy, unmute. Thank you.
Okay, I'm here. Hello, everybody. Mine's not quite as astrologically inclined, but it's kind of dovetails as it always has. When I was training with Jeffrey Wolf Green in Boulder between 2003 and 2004, I was also dovetailing into just diving really deep into releasing a lot of trauma, a lot of past life stuff, and I was doing that with somatic breath therapy. So that's kind of always been the thing that I have dovetailed along with astrology. And my chart is up right now because I am the poster child for everything that's happening right now. My natal Mercury and Venus is conjunct in Capricorn in the 11th house. So I also have Saturn and Pisces in the 12th. So I'm very tuned into collective energies right now. They're pretty intense. And so out of necessity, I've had to use everything that I've been trained in just to navigate my way through the intensity, the huge wave of fear and anxiety that I feel on a collective level. And what I really get from having all of this Capricorn energy is the stripping away of what is not essential, purposeful, and relevant. So really just like the most essential and most important things right now. So the number one thing being for me is coming back to our essential breath. And ironic that this virus, the one thing that gets stripped away for a lot of these people in the extreme is in the lungs, it's in the breath. They can't breathe, and they have to have oxygen forced into their lungs because they can't take a deep breath in. But you're on essential breath. It brings us back home to ourselves. It connects us with ourselves, our source, our planet, and all of life on the planet and each other. It connects us to that which truly supports us and all of life. So it's inclusive. There's no separation between ourselves and all of life. And so us living the way we have been, where there's sort of this exclusivity of, I'm just going to live over here in my little bubble and it's not going to have an impact on anyone else, that's ending, obviously. So I use the breath because it's innate. You are actually born with a connected breath. Animals in the animal kingdom, that is what they use to help them integrate a traumatic event or to integrate pain. So if you watch animals breathe, their breath is naturally connected and works really well. The only animals who do not breathe this way are those that are in captivity. So that's really interesting. The essential breath, stripped away back, is the basis and foundation for releasing and then stepping in to our higher vibrational frequencies, which is what's really happening. Earth is vibrating at a higher level, and we are being asked to vibrate with the earth. And so any resistance to that, of holding on to those denser frequencies, the gap is getting wider and wider, and it's getting more and more impossible to do that. So in order to be able to continue to live here on earth, we have to step up. So currently where we are is we're straddling both things. I'm very much in that myself. You know, obviously, you know, it's down to making sure you've got your food and your water and the necessities to live here on earth. And then it's also taking that next step forward, which is what I feel the Mars and Saturn conjunction in Aquarius is all about. So ironically, it was Stacie that asked me to come and speak. And when I received her message, I actually had the experience of feeling like I had an elephant sitting on my chest. It was that intense. So I knew that it was, you know, time to step forward and share, you know, how to navigate through all of this on a very personal level. So once we do connect our breath, what it does is it brings us to the present moment, and it gives us the clarity to be able to know what we need to do next in any given moment. And because I'm tuned in to the collective energies, I have to be personally more proactive and very intentionally collect with source and breathe in and anchor those energies into my body. So it's not about a disassociation and leaving my body and going up into the higher realms. I have to anchor that in and have to ground it and integrate it into my day-to-day life. And so that will be one of the ways that we'll be able to move forward as these cycles continue to unfold. Now, as Kimmery and Kristin and several others have mentioned, the virus is a catalyst. It's not easy to look at it that way. It's a catalyst and it's a facilitator. It's kind of a tough thing to think of it as being purposeful, but it is. It is part of this death and rebirth process that we're in, and it will continue to come in many different ways and forms. These cycles will continue to be very triggering. So if we haven't done that emotional work, that releasing of the old traumas from past lives and ancestral stuff and in our DNA, we will continue to be triggered, and all of that will come to the surface. And then we can use the breath, much like we would if we were giving birth, to help us breathe through the contractions of those cycles. The necessity to release what no longer serves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually will be facilitated by the waves that are coming. And the pressure, I'll just kind of describe it the way that I'm experiencing it. I literally experience it like just this enormous external pressure pushing on the outside. And then I also have this enormous pressure to expand on the inside. So that will continue to be compounded as time goes on. And so we will literally have no choice. Sometimes it will be so backed up against the wall that we won't be able to distract ourselves in any other way. So what we'll be needing to do is literally breathe ourselves through the contractions of that, when sometimes there might not be anything else. It could be the middle of the night and you could wake up with just enormous waves of anxiety. So just breathe with that and make sure that your breathing is connected, meaning that there's no pause between the inhale and the exhale. and make sure that your exhale is nice and relaxed, and just think of that as that you are, with the exhale, you're releasing, and with the inhale, you're receiving. And if you do that, you'll be able to ride these waves a lot easier. One thing I want to bring up too that could be, that I noticed wasn't brought up, and I think it needs to be, another catalyst that we will be dealing with is 5G. There hasn't been a lot talked about it, but it's going to be a catalyst and facilitator in very much the same way that this virus is. So that'll be something we'll be needing to pay attention to. There will be people that, will become ill because of it, but it won't necessarily be a direct cause, but more like a facilitator of whatever is left in the body that needs to leave. So that is pretty much all I have to say about that. I'm not even sure where I'm at on my 10 minutes. I think I'm just right on time. But that is going to be it. Coming back to the essential breath and everything that's important to you, and then adding that to whatever it is that you already use to support yourself, whether it's walking, practicing yoga, all of the tools that you may have gathered up until this point are going to be what will support you through these times. And then if you can share that with other people, that will also be super vital. So that is it. That's all I got for you guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Cyndy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes. Our next speaker is, our next talk actually was written by Leah Breznay, and it will be read by Sue Hilliard. Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, Linda. Capricorn Aquarius merging energies. We are witnessing and experiencing such an extraordinary time frame. It's a pleasure to be alive and be a part of it. I believe we are going through one of the greatest events on our planet. Some call it awakening or ascension, but the essence of it is that human consciousness on a mass level is experiencing a quickening, a leap into evolution. Although it is generally very good news, we need to remember that our individual as well as collective evolutionary lessons are not necessarily easy. If they were easy, they wouldn't be lessons. I drew up this chart at my location, so disregard the houses. Mars and Saturn are in absolute conjunction in Aquarius, showing very different powers combining. At the same time, they are changing from Capricorn to Aquarius. Saturn and Capricorn correlate to the collective consciousness, what we consciously perceive and know, and to our overall reality and world. Saturn is coming out of its own sign to a very different atmosphere, which can be uncomfortable, at times even scary, as it enters the sign of the unknown, the unseen, and the not consciously perceived. So we may feel and sense something, but not sure yet what it is. This itself is a perfect example of the current situation we are all in, but have never experienced before. It is strange, uncomfortable, and we don't know what's next. Welcome to Saturn and Aquarius, right on the cusp. But let's remember that this is also the sign of liberation, a sign of humanity as a whole, also a sign of unrestrained energies that may be released unexpectedly from within, and yet we didn't even know existed. This is a sign of our hidden powers. No wonder it's a sign of suddenness and explosions. Yet it is also brother and sisterhood and individual and collective freedom. So when Saturn enters this new realm, there is of course some difficulty, resistance, and struggle. This explains how the majority of people feel right now. We are in the middle of a crisis. Life as it was has ceased, and we have entered completely uncharted territory. Now with Mars conjunct, it is extremely difficult and troublesome. The planet of will, drive, speed, and war is joining Saturn, which prefers to go steady with known structures. But now it's like the brake and gas pedal is pushed at the same time. Everybody feels this. We are restricted to our homes. Yet we feel some impatience, the desire for something else, perhaps a lot of something else. But instead we have to sit at home most of the time waiting for the unknown to reveal itself. When will it be over? What on earth can we do now? What the heck is actually going on? So we sit on fire. At the same time, Pluto, asteroid Ceres, and Jupiter are conjunct in Capricorn between 24 and 25 degrees, all conjunct Saturn and Mars within 5 degrees. Pluto, the unconscious evolutionary pull and push, and our deepest unconscious security symbol, is just as hot as Saturn and Mars. If we haven't burnt our backside yet, this conjunction will fire up all kinds of energies from deep within. This conjunction is an extreme evolutionary propeller. Time to evolve, 100 miles an hour, or die. Jupiter is the symbol of our inherent desire to search for the truth, to understand the nature of things, even beyond the visible world. What happens when this relatively irresponsible, risk-taking symbol merges with the symbol of our deepest unconscious securities? Jupiter gets Pluto into trouble. It can push it out of its safety zone, reflecting our current strange fears and anxieties. Lamb asteroid is conjunct Jupiter and creates a four-bodied stellium. Lamb correlates to an aspect of Jesus, a manifestation of divine experience that is beneficial, extremely loving and supporting. In Capricorn, it correlates to a deep, loving responsibility, a kind of parental care and help. Lilith asteroid is at 3 degrees Capricorn, conjunct Lamb and the South Node. Thus, the whole sign of Capricorn is connected via continuous conjunctions from its beginning to its end, and to the cusp of Aquarius via Saturn and Mars there. If anything would fundamentally change the structures of reality as we knew it, here we have it. I do not know when such astrological formation, if ever, had been in place before, but I dare to say it is very rare. In fact, the whole spectrum of the sign of Capricorn is being heavily engaged and activated in ways such as never before. All correlations to Capricorn are going to be affected in unimaginable intensities during this period. We'll come to a point where reality will have no choice but to change. Now, all this can be related to the coronavirus crisis, yet unconsciously with Uranus Aquarius impacting Saturn Capricorn, we sense that something is going on behind the visible scenes of reality. Fear of 5G, confusion, being left in the dark, fear of soldiers on streets in countries around the world. We feel vulnerable, locked in our homes, a danger to our sheer survival. Somewhere deep within, it sneaks into our conscious awareness that the New World Order plans to reduce the population to 500 million. We are around 7 billion, so this plan very obviously intends to slaughter most of us to begin with, then make the rest literal slaves with chips in their head, conveniently controlled via a switch. So these marginal thoughts can sneak into our heads now. In the coming weeks or months, a lot of disclosure will happen, which is directly related to these issues. But please know in a positive way, essentially. However, right now, for many people, these thoughts will come to the surface from the depths of the subconscious and unconscious. The emphasis and meaning of the survival theme that is played out now, mainly by the coronavirus, will come to the surface later. More of the unknown will be embraced to the known, and it will gain more meaning after highly Aquarian events take place now and in the near future. Disclosure and high technology are also Aquarius. Right now, I just want to mention the virus is the surface or apparent issue we're dealing with, but behind it are other Aquarian issues. The Capricorn planets in the Aquarius cusp reflect shock waves, earthquakes, and complete changes to the reality of humanity on many levels. It can be called a socially shared experience of cognitive dissonance on a large scale. We will need to go through that soon. On some level, we are already heading there. Contradictory information, news, social media. And it's getting ever harder to discern what's real and what's not. This process will continue to come to a head as Saturn makes its passage into Aquarius. On the surface, it's the coronavirus, and there is indeed a virus, but the world has never been locked down before. The price of evolution is to be able to completely let go of the known and arrive, discover, and restructure reality by embracing the unknown. One thing is for sure, the world as we knew it before this crisis will never be the same again. The structure of reality will change on many levels. Our understanding as a collective will go through a transformation, including spiritually, technologically, and financially how to survive. After inner and outer restructuring, the new structure or reality looks very promising. The world as we knew it will never be the same again. A world that is kinder, freer, truer, where everyone is more comfortable and above all, safe. Where Mother Earth rests from the constant human activity that often harms her and her creatures. For we ourselves created our own realities, Saturn and Aquarius, and embrace the realization that is indeed our own subconscious and higher consciousness that created it all, and for no other reason but to learn and grow. So in the end, all is indeed well, Cancer North Node. Let's learn to let go of old ego patterns and programming that came from the past, mostly from wrong conclusions of past experiences. Let's start to forgive ourselves first and then forgive others. Let's imagine that we can live like that right now, right here on our beautiful, precious planet Earth. When we choose love and are able to balance it equally towards others and self, we learn the main Aquarian lessons of unity, and we are on our way home. We are on our way to ascension, one big step closer to God. Blessings to all.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sue. And now our next speaker is Stacie Pazura. Please go ahead, Stacie.
Hi, everyone. I just want to start out by sending out my love and my wishes to all of you who are listening, and as well as your loved ones. This is a really stressful time. So the reason I've chosen to talk about the psychological and emotional impacts of social distancing is because this is the most widespread factor that's affecting all of us. This is a global thing. All around the world we are experiencing this, and it's just important to remember the reasons that the social distancing is necessary right now. The virus is it's a highly contagious virus, and it has a rapid spread. And then there's also the factor of the fact that people who are asymptomatic, people who don't have symptoms, who don't know they're sick, can be carriers, and they can infect others. And so because of the rapid transmission, the best response is to just keep people separated so that this transmission can't accelerate, so that it can kind of get over the hump and then we can reintegrate. But the need for this social distancing is a source of major anxiety for people, because our patterns, our regular patterns of socially relating to one another and to within our communities, it's all been upended. We didn't see this coming in terms of having to go to this kind of extent of protecting ourselves. But many of us, obviously the universal advice is to stay home when you can, and when you do have to go out for necessities, to just practice simple things like staying 6 feet away from somebody, eliminating handshakes and hugs, and wearing masks. This does have a psychological effect and an emotional effect on people, because it's, like, for example, the simple gesture of a handshake or a hug, it's just an important behavior that we have to reinforce bonds and to express love and acceptance to one another, and we're not able to do these things right now, and so it can create just a sense of just feeling distant from people at the moment. Let's see, I do want to reference the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that occurred in January of this year. This is actually something that I talked about at the 2020 Astrological interview, and at the time I could, it's very apparent that whatever this evolutionary impulse in Capricorn is unleashing was going to be very massive, and it was going to be very conscious. But of course, I didn't have really an idea of what form that was going to take. And obviously now some time has passed and events have occurred. And so we can see that this coronavirus, this pandemic, is a key part of this whole process. So the chart here is just an imprint of that overall process, which is, I believe, 34 years. And I don't really want to talk about Pluto or Saturn or any of that, but I want to pay specific attention to the fact that Uranus is in Taurus, and its natural ruler Venus is in Aquarius. This is key because Uranus in Taurus represents a pandemic. It's unexpected. It's fast moving. It brings us to our survival instinct. And it moves so fast that we just don't know exactly what it is. We're having to go moment by moment by moment and try to adapt as we go. This can be very difficult for people, for most people, well, probably for all people. And then, of course, you have this symbol of Venus and Aquarius, which is, it's a pretty clear reflection of the need for social distancing, and the social trauma that this process would entail. The thing about Uranus is that it's just so, it's so rapid, it's so out of our hands. The future is unseen, and this can just create just a general stress. We don't know what we're in control of. There's just so many unknowns, and so we don't know how to act, and the stress can create a fragmentation. We can just get so stressed out that our logical brains, sometimes aren't as effective as normal. But on the other hand of that, I also want to point out that Uranus represents an opportunity for an evolutionary leap. And what we see with this virus is that it's exposing the limitations that we have in our society. And it's telling us, okay, you gotta get back to the essentials. We gotta remember what's really important and really focus on those things. And in doing so, we have the opportunity to cast off some of those outmoded patterns that we've been carrying in our social structures. So that's just an important thing to remember, because with the stress of everything, we can get caught up in the immediacy of it and forget that what we're doing in this moment and how we're approaching it and responding it is important in determining what we're going to come back to, once everything is normal and this thing is run its course. Let's see. I do want to point out that right now transiting Venus is, I believe, 29 Aquarius, 29 Taurus, I believe. I'm not sure, but there's a square between the Venus and the imprint of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction and where we are now. And so this is really just kind of symbolizing the fact that we've come to a point where, we're starting, we've become aware of the scope of this thing. And, our survival instincts have been triggered. Some of the problems that can come with that is one thing Jeffrey Wolf Green taught is that when the survival instinct is triggered, sometimes the stress can be so great that we can find ourselves doing and behaving in ways that we wouldn't ordinarily behave. Things you never thought you'd do, you just might find yourself doing. It's a potential. But there's also the flip side of it, which is that you could find yourself behaving in ways that where you're discovering inner resources that you didn't know you had, where responding to the crisis literally shows you like, oh, wow, I have a strength in making people feel comfortable, or I have a strength in organizing, or this or that. So, that can be very positive. Some of the major stresses that people are dealing with right now are obviously, upsets in the markets and people losing on investments that they thought that they would have. There's massive losses of jobs. Systems are being overwhelmed. It could very much impact the election. People are so stressed out and overwhelmed with scary negative news that a lot of people are just avoiding the topic of politics altogether, which is understandable for sure. But at the same time, there is a threat of, well, I'm calling it a threat, that's my opinion. But, we have work to do in, at least here in the US, where we have a problematic leadership in place right now. And it's important for people to stay engaged in order to bring about the social change that we need. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's see. Also, with just the inundation of stress, it's very easy to overreact to things, to maybe just be short-fused with people and just sort of run around like we have our heads cut off, so we can get impatient with one another. And that's not something that will be helpful as we reintegrate, because people can internalize the trauma of this time and project it into the future, and where there's a potential of where we may not have the same kind of trust for one another. We may have a subconscious fear of being close to one another and doing things like that. We have no idea how it's really going to play out. One thing and as far as doing things you never thought you'd do, or I don't know, this is manifesting. We see it manifesting in things like greed and hoarding, you know, like in terms of greed, like as an example, you have senators who sold off millions of stocks, you know, so that they wouldn't have to experience the market meltdown while leaving everyone else to fall prey to that. We saw major hoarding in our grocery stores, where, you know, as soon as this thing was announced and acknowledged to be as dangerous as it is, and as big of a thing that it is, people panic and they go to the store and they just buy everything they can without thinking of the other people who have a need for the same item. Thankfully, that has that's been reduced, thankfully. And then you have scammers. That's another aspect of this greed, linked to the survival system. People are more emboldened to try and cheat people out of their resources, take advantage of the situation. I don't know if anyone saw this yesterday on April 1st, but the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, put out his daily briefing, and it was just fantastic in my opinion. His thoughts came from his own mind. He was blunt, he was straight, but he also made a point to share his own experience of how this virus is affecting him, and just publicly acknowledging the emotions that he went through, and just really letting people see how human he is, and which then we listen to and relate to ourselves. So it's on YouTube, so it can be found, and I really recommend it because it's a lot of good information there. I've got 1 minute. Oh dear. Okay, so I guess coping strategies is the next thing.
Stacie,
there was a little, yes.
Please do take as much time as you need.
Oh, okay, thanks. There is a little checklist thing that's circulating around social media. I think it's on the internet, but it was written by Dr. Margie Daunton, who is a doctor of psychology in New York State. And she just felt compelled to make a list of different things that we can do to protect our mental health and to nurture our mental health during this time. Really important things. And I just found her suggestions to be just so relevant and helpful. So I just want to paraphrase some of them, which is, oops, my timing. It's throwing me. Stop. Okay, thank you. The first thing is just keeping a daily routine where it's balanced with productivity and self-care, not one or the other. Just, regular sleep schedules, eating well, getting dressed, wearing colors, because colors just sort of have a subconscious effect of lifting the spirits. And as far as self-care goes, she suggests things like just moving the body. She makes a point that repetitive and left-right movements are very helpful in coping with generalized anxiety. And as far as like a left-right movement, that would be an example is like drumming, something that engages the left and then the right. It just has a balancing effect. Let's see, and then creative activity is hugely important because it disengages the left brain engages the right brain, and it allows for an expression of your feelings, and as well as, you know, your optimism as well. It just helps you detach and just to focus on something super simple. She says it's important to get fresh air, and if you can't go outside, she suggests putting a fan in the window and just blowing in the fresh air. Also finding sources of levity. You know, they're just little things that you can find, little videos on the internet of like animals, or you know, watch a stand-up comedian who's really good, or just some kind of gentle, you know, comedy or something like that. Just something that lets you disengage from the immediacy of things and just take a breather from the intensity of our times. Also, it's important for us to engage with others. So, you know, since we can't go and visit and we're not running into people all day, it's important to to make some kind of effort to reach out to those that we have relationships with, because it's an important, it gives meaning to our lives to have these relationships with other people. And with times being so scary, it's just, this is a good time to really deepen your relationships and appreciate each other, you know, for who we all are. Also, limit your intake of news. It's important to get a general idea, probably daily, but you want to limit that, and it's better to do it in chunks than to watch news all day, which is something that I'm prone to doing. It'll really limit the stress if you just take it in small doses. Also, to find ways of being helpful while you're maintaining social distance. You know, it could be something like bringing in the neighbor's garbage can, or calling a neighbor, and, you know, especially if you have someone in a vulnerable group, to offer to do shopping or just see if there's anything you can do. You know, and in the medical field right now, we see that, oh, it's beautiful what they're doing. They're really banding together and helping each other, and just, it's wonderful to see how people are joining resources, and yeah, so it really brings you to the beauty of humanity, and it's important that we don't lose that awareness. Let's see. Also, with those who have children, this is a really important time to be gentle on them, because, you know, their normal routines have been disrupted. They don't have the social stimulation that they're used to having. They're pent up in the house. They're probably frustrated and probably misbehave a little more than normal. And Dr. Daunton says that this isn't the time to be overly aggressive with reprimanding. It's a time where compassion is at a major premium, and, you know, children can really be soothed by touching and listening, and, you know, maybe giving them new and different activities that they haven't done before, just something to keep their sense of adventure alive. Also, for adults, it's helpful to spend a lot of time with children, and if you don't have access to children, which I don't, animals. And the reason for this is because, you know, children and animals are just really defined by just a purity and a simplicity, and it's very calming to be around, you know, those energies. Also, it's important to try and be conscious of how much worrying you're doing. There's a lot of things you can't control, and it isn't realistic to say, oh, just don't worry, because it's a time to worry. But we can go overboard if we worry too much. So Dr. Daunton suggests just giving yourself a chunk of time, like half an hour a day, where you can actively worry. But what you want to do during that time is to also focus on solutions, not just having it be an unsolvable problem. Just brainstorm. That's helpful. And my personal input is, it's also a time to really give yourself credit. Don't be too hard on yourself right now. We're all, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what kind of landscape we're going to be walking back into when things get back to normal. Well, a new normal. And so it's easy to just get lost in the worry of it, but as much as we can, just stay present and just try to think of productive ways that you can respond, because how we respond now is going to determine the quality of life that we go back to. So that's it. I wish everyone the best.
Great, thank you so much, Stacie. Our next speaker, our final speaker, is Cameron Allen. Please go ahead, Cameron.
Awesome. Oh, wait, you have it up? Hey, Linda, I made some adjustments to mine, so can I do it to where I can share my screen?
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is it to where you can see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so COVID-19, perspective, reflections, and potential solutions. So to begin with, I just was sitting with it, and when I observed the chart with the big conjunction between Saturn and Pluto, I was just blown away by how many correlations in my chart that I had, and how much I was experiencing it inside myself and with the people I work with here in Memphis, Tennessee. So yeah, I was just reflecting on that, and I just wanted to share my chart. Even if you look, this is the day of the conjunction. Even the moon was on my natal south node. So it was just really big for me, and I've just been experiencing a lot. And even within the past year, I kept getting messages, downloads, information in my meditations. It was just telling me to cleanse. It was telling me to cleanse, and it was telling me to invite other people to cleanse, right? And because this is happening on a planetary level, we always have to remember that we are a part of nature. And whenever nature's doing something, it's always a big indication that we need to hop on board too. And I've shown this reflected in all these planetary south nodes right here. Every single one of these planetary south nodes are being activated by this chart specifically. So that's something to be mindful of, just the south node, and how a lot of times people perceive it as letting things go, and how it's a deep time for letting a lot of stuff go, especially as well with all the planets that were passing over Pluto. With the ending phase, the balsamic phase, is just important to allow ourselves to release as much as possible. And then also Capricorn corresponding to grief, allowing ourselves to grieve and process things. And I forget who said it a few minutes ago, but the breathing and the breath, grief corresponds directly to the lungs. So that grief that we feel inside ourselves, we have to breathe it out. We have to allow ourselves to process it. And Capricorn also being reflection, with social distancing, we are reflecting on things. So I want to also talk about spectrum awareness, because where I live in Memphis, Tennessee, a lot of people are there's some people who are panicking excessively. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, there's people who aren't taking it seriously. So I just want to talk about just the spectrum of awareness, that what is happening or what could be potentially occurring right now. And I listened to a few other people before, and they were talking about causal versus reflective and how the planets work. And there's a theory by Rupert Sheldrake, this called the morphogenetic theory, So what it has to do with is actually like how our electromagnetic field is responding and how that is on some level, it's quantum, right? It's quantum. So it's like probability of something happening, and just an open invitation for people to reflect on that, because I feel like inside myself that I'm not convinced yet if things are causal or reflective, or if there's a combination of the two that we should be mindful of. And also on this spectrum here, we see on the left side, we have this person who's in fear. And then on the right side, we have this person who's like awakening and knowing that it's totally fine if we're going into both of these spaces. But the main thing and that's important from my perspective is to know that it is a spectrum and to hold space for the spectrum inside of yourself and then with others as well. And then I want to talk about egocentric versus ecocentric. So over the past few days and the past few weeks, there's been like this occurrence where all these animals are showing back up and smog from over the cities are clearing away, and how we need to tap in deeply to how we're going to treat this planet, right? How are we going to treat this planet after these things are occurring? And to not be so stuck in our box of like what it is that is happening specifically only to humans. And I know everybody that's listening to this talk is probably aware of that, but it's just something important to tune into. Another thing that I see that's a big spectrum is elitism versus decentralization. So that's a big Aquarius thing that I've been tapping into and feeling inside of myself, right? We have all these things going on with the electromagnetic frequencies and 5G, and people even, all the theories about what 5G is doing, what it isn't doing. Myself, personally, I'm just observing and trying to learn as much as I can about it. But then on the other side of that, a lot of people also are like, we're awakening and the new world is coming and the new age is happening. And like I said before with the other thing, I'm not convinced of either one yet personally. I'm just giving an open invitation to observe the spectrum and to know when to respond properly to each of these two things, because it's very, very important. And this is totally a Uranus and Taurus thing right here. Like on one side, you have 5G that could be affecting the environment and changing the resources to like being like mainly based on technology. And then decentralization is about, making radical shifts and going back to nature and sitting with the fact that if we thought that money was the main resource before, we're confused. And we have to go back to the land and to the planet Earth and knowing that that is the major resource of the planet. And then with solutions. So on the right side, there's this guy named Wim Hof, and he has these breathing exercises that you can find on YouTube. And they're great. They're great breathing exercises with all these things going on with the lungs. It's just something really simple, really practical that you can do every single morning or multiple times a day. Or if you're starting to feel like someone said they were feeling an elephant on their chest, the Wim Hof breathing exercises are amazing. They're amazing. And he even did research to where he was actually injected with, I forget exactly what it was, but it was some type of virus or like something that was supposed to attack the immune system. And with his breathing techniques, the virus or whatever it was that was supposed to attack his immune system, it didn't even affect him. And not only did he do that, but he also got other people to do it, and they did a whole study on it. So it would just be a good thing, because I know we have a lot of time. Instead of looking at the news, this would be something that would be productive for us to do while we're in this quarantine space. And then also an open invitation for people to look into Rupert Sheldrake, which he has a theory of morphogenetic field, and then also what's called morphic resonance. And those things are a lot about like the heart and how the heart is circulating or how the heart is coherent and how it creates a structure around us, right? To me, I look at the morphogenetic field as Uranus itself, right? It's a very Uranus Aquarian thing. right? It's like the information that is outside of us that's not necessarily linear, and it's informing Saturn. So you got the structure outside of that, which would be Aquarius, which would be like Saturn and Uranus, and then it's informing our physical body, our physical form, on how to respond and react to things. And then also with the 5G stuff going on, it's just good to learn about that, and also to do, potentially do meditations around this. Like imagining our Taurus field being built up and strengthened. It's just a really good thing to do at this time. And again, Aquarius and EMF, right here on the right, I have the picture of the guy with the morphogenetic field, and how the heart is actually the strongest electromagnetic force within the body, and how we need to stay connected to our heart, connected to our breath, and create space in these times. And then also with Saturn and Mars, specifically from a medical astrology perspective, going into Aquarius, really thinking about our nervous system and how we can strengthen that. I know in these times, a lot of people talk about the immune system, but we have to take a step back, and specifically with people that we know or for ourselves, if we're nervous and full of anxiety, then we have to realize that we need to work on our nervous system first. We have to begin to take deep breaths. We have to begin to, take steps away, right? Not saying disassociate, but take a step away and observe what's happening so that we can calm our nervous system down, so that we can actually summon the creative force and the energy that we need for our immune system to be as strong and at full capacity. And then in the middle, I have a picture of a crystal. It's called shungite. And what shungite does, it actually blocks the electromagnetic frequencies of like Wi-Fi, 5G, and other things like that. So I thought that's a really great tool. And I've been working with shungite for a while now, and it's just profound. You could put it in front of your laptop. You could put it actually on your routers, or you could just wear it. Because I know there's a lot of 5G towers going up. I'm starting to see them myself. And then the last thing I want to talk about is let's just, stay fully aware of what's happening. Staying fully aware of what's happening. Because since all these things have been going on with the coronavirus, there's still laws being passed, right? So they had a big thing with the South Dakota or the Dakota pipelines, and there was actually a court case where there was a victory in the court case system, and they were saying the Dakota tribes, they won a case, essentially. It was a lawsuit, I'm pretty sure. And then while this is happening, laws are just slowly being passed that criminalize our ability to protest this moving forward into the future. And then also just a few days ago, or a week or so ago, there was another law passed that was about 5G. And it was actually to ensure the United States' ability to use 5G in going forward into reality. So these are just all things that we have to still stay very vigilant about and observe what's happening. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to share today. I tried to keep the topics a little different than everybody else, and I appreciate everybody else for sharing so much, because I gained so much knowledge and I made so many connections, and I just appreciate this community. And yeah, so if anybody has any questions, just let me know.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Could you please stop your share? Thanks. Okay, great. And now we're going to have a summing up by Erin Sullivan. So over to you, Erin. And if anyone else would like to comment, you can after Erin, okay? Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Oh, you can see me. Partway through this amazing, really brilliant, there wasn't one person who even vaguely fell from the side to the side of the topic. So everything was very centered. I've just really got a lot of it. It's very emotional at times, because things were reminded, I was reminded of my own generation, and I had to laugh. when Bradley said, we were talking about my generation. Yeah, I'm Pluto and Leo, and we're the longest Pluto transit in the zodiac. So there are more of us, yeah? And that's depleted the global economy. It's depleted as we age or mature or both. It's not always necessary to do both at the same time. But it's true that indeed we did sort of eat all the food and drink all the milk. But the problem lies not so much about our generation, but we have to remember that there was another very significant impact health-wise made on the world, and it was AIDS. HIV positive turned into something where people died in millions. And it was a global epidemic that wiped out millions of not only gay men and drug addicts, but also just people who came into contact because it was so contagious, although it was said to be only transmitted sexually, which would be Pluto and Scorpio, wouldn't it? And it was the Pluto and Leo and Pluto and Virgo and Pluto and Libra generation that was hugely affected by it. And this was like knocking off every kind of person that you could think of, especially it impacted in Canada, in London, the arts community, theater directors, painters, artists, all people who were homosexual or straight, who had been ever injected, with unclean breaths. So it was major. It was as big as this, and it took, a couple of decades for that to be able to be controlled. It was done by earnest scientists who were not even vaguely concerned about who had it. They just wanted to get rid of it. And so, there was no, bias in this one. There was bias socially, absolutely. I mean, if you had HIV, you didn't tell anybody. My brother actually was HIV positive. He has a Virgo Pluto. And while it was going through Libra and then Leo, and is when we finally began, when it was going into Scorpio, that was when Saturn was in Capricorn as well. And Pluto was in Libra and Virgo and Scorpio. So it was over about 12-year period where HIV was being taken very seriously, and it was like one of the top medical breakthroughs that had been made in centuries. And I mentioned my brother because he is completely without any residue of HIV positive, none at all. But he also was working in Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia, at the Dr. Peter Center, where they took in, junkies and fags, people who were denigrated by society, and just sort of, nobody attended them. And so also too, I think it's okay for me to divulge this at this point. Howard Tesportis, my dear, dear friend of many, many years, and a very, very well-known astrologer, he died of AIDS in 1992 in May. The thing I did with him towards the end is he always wanted to go to Australia. And so and in the winter of 1991, I said, okay, I can do that. And it was when I was still on the road and, younger and moving around. And astrology was a much different place. We didn't have to communicate the way we actually got to go places. So I rang a few people in Australia and said, this is what's happening and this is what we need. And they said, no problem, come to the conference. He can do a lecture. Brian Clark set up a whole weekend for us to do a workshop together. We traveled through, we went to all sorts of fantastic places. Took him home after a month, and then he died in May of 1992 of AIDS. So there was nothing by 1992. After that was the breakthrough in science, because scientists actually don't have any real interest or concern in their sort of working nature except science. And so that's where I'm thinking, okay, I'm being really positive about this, because I know a couple of doctors who are deeply involved, invested in it. One is Dr. Larry Brilliant, who is one of our farm members from the 60s, Woodstock, the whole lot. And Dr. Larry Brilliant single-handedly wiped out smallpox and blindness in India in the early 90s. I'm sorry, in the mid 60s, traveling through and with a team, obviously not himself, but he had a whole team. And he's now on the road at every talk show and talking about what's going on with this COVID-19. And makes me kind of laugh. It's sort of like scientists, they love this kind of stuff, okay? And it sounds weird, but it's not. They love it because then they get to do something, you see, as opposed to sit about and being scientists and poking around in laboratories or looking after, sick people. They want to do the research. They want to solve the problem. They want to get to the bottom of it. So that's who we have to count on as far as getting to the bottom of the actual illness, not of social. The social aspect of it is going to be interesting because anybody who is coming out of my generation is going to remember that there was a tremendous disparity between scientists themselves about working on something that was killing off junkies and fags, right? So, I mean, it was a real political situation. We don't have that political situation now existing except in the government. And the government had nothing to do with the curing and the complete absolute wiping out of HIV positive and AIDS from no one gets it. Yeah. But it's the government who's actually working against this, not funding science to get to the bottom of what COVID-19 is. I know this because I have talked to a couple of scientists who are friends of mine from the old days, and we are, of that generation, and we're on our way out, and we don't want other people younger than us to be in threat or on their way out. And so this is where the science part comes in really, really significantly. And scientists aren't soulless beasts who just poke around with petri dishes and, minute little creatures in them. They're actually trying to save everything. During this time, like my brother, I'm a Pluto and Leo person. My brother is Pluto and Virgo. He's the one who's not. They cured it. And Pluto and Libra. They were probably the dregs of the AIDS epidemic was when Pluto was in Libra. And then there was finally a cure. And it strikes me that when Pluto was in Scorpio, that was when the majority of individuals contracted AIDS. And it wasn't, again, just gay men. It was people who injected and shared needles, including women. So there were also women who were HIV positive. They were not treated in the same way. They were actually discriminated against worse than any of the others, the junkies or the gay people, seriously. So a lot of women died unknown, just on the streets, because they were positive and they were going into AIDS and they finally got it and they died. It's not a pleasant disease. This is not something that any of you young people want to hear or know about or see. But what we're looking at now, I think this is where you know, I have to say, I'm with the scientists. I really think that it's really important that we recognize that there's a level of intelligence that's going on that's way beyond us, and that there are certain types of individuals who happen to fall into the category of scientists who are absolutely fascinated by what's going on. I mean, they're very, very upset, but they're in there like a dirty shirt. So there's a lot of people working on this that have spiritual bonding, like Larry Brilliant, for example, was the late Ram Dass's doctor for the last 50 years. That's how long I've known Larry Brilliant. And so there's, you know, all these important people who have had these diseases that no one wants to talk about. And it wasn't until Harvey Milk got it in San Francisco, or became infected and then started to demonstrate the symptoms of HIV, and then died of AIDS. Yeah. So that, and then there was Stonewall, you know, which was a huge revolution where they were against the communities that were not allowing them to rent an apartment. You know, I mean, they didn't live on the streets because they liked it, because it was more fun, but they lived on the streets because they were discriminated against. And maybe you don't remember that, but it was really serious. I mean, it was shocking, because it was bad enough to have HIV, to know that it was going to actually eventually morph into AIDS and that you would die. Wasn't much fun. But by November the 6th of 1983, when Pluto entered Scorpio, that was when we really started to realize that we were in a very serious epidemic. And it wasn't until well into the mid 1990s, that's 90, it was about 25 years of HIV and AIDS being a scourge that was never going to be cured. And it is. And so when we talk today about what's going on, it's equally horrible, because it's indiscriminate. It actually is affecting individuals, no matter whether they're straight, gay, blue, black, whatever. It really is a tremendous plague upon us. And these plagues, they do have their grief associated with them. They have to. But there's also the realization that there are these effects that take place in reality that we have to deal with. And the consciousness raising during the AIDS and the HIV era is pretty much exactly the same as the kind of consciousness raising that's going on now, only now it's going on between, you know, everybody. It's not just about, you know, being gay, being a junkie, or anything. It has to do with just being human. And so if we can extend our compassion instead of withdraw the compassion and fear, and protect ourselves by remaining, you know, somewhat isolated. Yeah, I think it's time for people to become much more self-centered in the true sense of the word. It's time for us to start to recognize that we're really, really in it this time again. I mean, there have been plagues for the beginning of time. I mean, biblical. I mean, it is a biblical situation we're in, except, you know, there's no Christ to blame it on and that kind of thing. So what we have to do is we have to realize that this is an indiscriminate one. There is no, I mean, everybody can get it, anybody. And so there's, you know, this great sort of wonderful feelings of love and concern and also science, because astrologers are scientists as well. So we're looking at symptom, we're looking at the cause, we're looking at the current situation and where it stands. We're projecting into the future. What do we want? How do we want to see this end? What can we do to make it help end? So, it just struck me toward the very end. I actually just private messaged Linda to see if it was okay for me to bring this up at the end, because it struck me right towards the closure that this is so like that AIDS epidemic that took place, except it is not discriminate. It is indiscriminate. Anyone can get it. A baby, which is a terrible thought. An elder, and then I have to laugh when oh God, his name's I have to look. Oh, Conrad. I can't see. I don't have my glasses. Anyway, when he said about talking about my Bradley, right? Yeah, talking about my generation, absolutely. It's my generation that's been through a big plague, and you're darn right, it's possible for it to take any one of us out at any time. And I'm not. My income is wholly astrological. It doesn't come from anywhere else, so that means that I'm in trouble. Yeah, and so are a lot of people in trouble because they're creative, they're artists, they're plying their trade based upon their art. And that was the problem with the AIDS people, is a great number of them were stage directors, actors, artists of every type. And so it takes out anyone and without any moral intention. So this is not a moral issue. It's an issue that is pandemic and that should bring us to a greater and higher level of moral understanding, acceptance, and know that there are, I'm a Canadian, but I live in New Mexico in Santa Fe because life, fate leads me here. All my kids are here, my grandkids. And I mean, there are people that are shunning other people, but it isn't the same. It's not the same. I mean, when you think of places like shopping markets that are opening their doors, my pet shop for where I pick up my cat food and cat treats, what they do, you can phone in, make an order, they will come to your car and bring it. So you don't have to come in and socially integrate. There's something different about this one. This plague has something to do with social integration, social compassion. And so compassion means to suffer with, compassion from the Latin. And so if we have compassion, it means we're suffering with the other. And if we can continue to use that compassion and that suffering on the part of others, instead of sitting alone on our couch crying because we can't see our people for 3 or days. I can't go to my friends for dinner, my 2 friends here in Santa Fe, unless we can sit like around the room and eat, sort of at least 6 feet apart. So, we're looking here at a social revolution. It's not just about COVID-19. It's about a social revolution. A lot of people are going to die. And yeah, my generation is on its way out. Pluto and Leo, we sort of, ate all the gold and, had all the fun and played right through to the great end. And I've got a great picture on my Facebook, by the way, of the Rolling Stones. And Keith Richards is a riot. He's hilarious. And there's a picture of him looking as more haggard than he really does. And it says, "If I go, that means you all go." And so there's even humor to be found. There's a lot of things that we can see in this situation where we can laugh our way through it, or we can talk on the, on this medium. This is amazing. There was no one to talk to during the AIDS epidemic. I had to suffer through my brother's death and everybody else's death, and Howard broke my heart. And then, and by the way, Jim Lewis did not have AIDS. He died of a brain tumor. I just want to make that clear because, that sort of went around. But it was in the same time frame. And he was a person who worked very strongly with AIDS, people with AIDS. He was gay, and he, that wasn't well known, but it's fine to reveal it now because he's wherever he is. And he's probably going to get me for it later, but we'll worry about that then. And so we, it brought, the gay and AIDS community and the sick people and the drug addicts, they somehow got it together and managed to form a coalition within themselves. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing with this program, with this COVID, these conversations that we're sharing. And so I just wanted to bring that up, to remember HIV/AIDS as something that was overcome. It was cured. It doesn't have the same stigma. I mean, it had a terrible stigma, whereas we've got something that doesn't have, which makes it seem like, oh, well, that's okay then, when it's not. And so, when on November 6th of 1983, when Pluto entered Scorpio, that took out a lot of people from that time forward. And I just wanted to mention that and go on about it a bit, because it really is important for us to recognize that, we will be okay. And, unfortunately, this is much more difficult because it is airborne, because it's a virus. It's not. It's the coughing and the bacterium that come out when you cough and so on that actually spreads the disease. And so, if you have to cough, for God's sake, cover your face. Even if you're in your own house, and look after yourselves, take care of yourselves, and have love in your heart for us all, so that we can get through this, because we will. I mean, we will get through it. We got scientists like crazy working on it, and it could be much sooner than the projection is, because as I said, scientists love stuff like this. And it's not because they're mentally ill or sick or horrible. It's because they love to fix the problem. And so that's kind of what we're looking at right now. And I just wanted to, it just came up when he was talking, and I just thought I really need to speak about this. And so I really wanted to share that part with you. Thank you so much. And thank you for these panels. This is great. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Erin Sullivan. Fantastic summing up. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our COVID-19 update. We'll be presenting another panel discussion soon. And now I'm going to unmute everyone, and would you all please thank our speakers?
Thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bradley, for bringing that up. That really that sparked it for me.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.